for Ireland, the Romans, or not the Romans, but the Normans did bring a very, I'll use the word robust again, a nice word, economic system. They definitely were very good business, commercial, artisans, everything. They were great builders. They were a superior civilization to what was in Ireland in a material sense, no question about that. They had the military paraphernalia that just walked. There was no chance. The Irish had no chance. They were like a Roman. What did they have? Not battalions. No, what do you call it? Not a centurion. Yeah, but what was the centurion in charge of?
League.
Was it? Huh?
League?
I don't know. You know. Anyway, when you think of it, centurion means like 100. Yeah, it was 100 people, 100 guys. So you're in charge of 100 guys. That's why centurion. But there's a name. There's a name for it.
A legionnaire?
A legion, of course.
Legionnaire.
Of course. Thank you. It would be equivalent to a legion, a Roman legion, which is like a fighting machine, and it will just cut a swath through anything. Well, the Normans were like that, so there was no stopping them. You just talked to them and said, "What do you want?" You just didn't try and get in their way. Anyway, what I'd like to do is try and imagine what happened to the Irish landscape and what happened to the people who were living there, who suddenly found themselves living under a new lord. And the surprising thing is not much. A century could go by, and this was true in a lot of places in Europe, that often the peasants in their little valleys or they had no idea what went on in their own times. The big lord, whether they were English or French, it meant almost nothing to them. They might look a little different, they'd come by on their horses or whatever, but they were still just the upper class, the aristocracy. But while economically, at first, although there were some major changes did take place fairly quickly, but at first the Normans just dug in and built what they normally did. They built their strongholds, which was Motte and Bailey. Are you familiar with the Motte and Bailey now? Well, they built Motte is a large mound, and anyway, it was an earthen and timber palisade, first of all, and then it grew into a castle. But it was in various stages, and it's very interesting to study those, how they developed. And you can see the remnants of them, the original Motte and Bailey, and then they would tend to build a wall outside of that, and then they'd start. But you could see the original Motte and Bailey would be smack dab, almost like a holy thing in the middle of the compound. It's very interesting to study how the Normans built their strong points. But anyway, they tended to set up a defense very soon, very quickly, because they were invaders, and they wanted to. So it was just a natural thing, and they built what's called a palisade. Palace, by the way, the word comes from the Latin word for a stake, P-A-L-U-S. So a palace or a pale or a palisade or any of those words comes from just building like what they did at Jamestown or anywhere else.
And spokes sticking up. All these spears sticking up so the British couldn't come over them. Is that it?
Oh no, I'm talking now about a fortified position like you're familiar with Jamestown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what they did was they built a palisade, a pale around it. Pardon?
P-A-L-A. I wondered where that name came from.
I was hoping that you'd pick up on that. Yeah. So that's where the word pale came from. So that in Norman Ireland, they kind of extended the pale, and it literally was. We're building a pale, a 3,000 mile, whatever, 1,600 mile pale, across. Well, of course, nobody has put any money up for it yet. But anyway, the great Hunter Duncan Hunter is going to build a pale across the border, along the border. But anyway, yeah, that's where the word pale from, and beyond the pale and all that stuff, all has to do with the Norman pale surrounding Dublin.
But they were the first to do cities?
Not really. No, not really. The Vikings and the Norsemen and so on did towns and cities, always on the coast. That they were earlier. But you remember now, these guys were just the settled versions of them. They had settled on the Seine River. If you ever want to really study the Normans, go to Normandy, but start off in... Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? But specifically, go to Rouen. Go to Rouen, and when you get to Rouen, you can see why they settled there, because it's the last really defendable place on the River Seine before it starts getting narrower. Yeah, so it speaks to you, and you just stand there and you see, well, I can see why they set up here, because it just had flat ground and hills behind it, and then after that it gets kind of a little weird. So, but from there they could take their ships right out, even though it's quite a way in. It's still it's totally navigable, beautiful all the way out, and they were sailors, they were Vikings, they were. So anyway, by the time they came to Ireland, they were much more than Vikings. They were, and yes, absolutely they built towns, and that's the distinguishing thing about it. But they weren't the first, is what I'm saying. But the Normans didn't spread off out into the woods and start homesteading and farming, and like they did in Kansas or here in America. That's not what they did. They went in and they took over the existing strong points, and they dominated it from the existing structure. But whether because of the canniness of them or the canniness of the native Irish chieftains, but they didn't fight with each other that much. They got on reasonably well, and they started the old traditional business of getting to know one another, getting to fix up with wives and stuff. They keep them quiet for a while, especially if she was a little wild. You wouldn't hear from her for a week or two about them fighting with the guy. Send that crazy daughter of mine over to old Fitzgerald over there or whatever. So they just mixed it up between them, and pretty soon there was little mutts running around that were neither Norman nor Irish, and it just became. And the Normans loved the Irish way of life because it was absolutely carefree. They're just whatever. Yeah, but they're just there was no great rules, and the religion. Now, of course, the priests were going crazy because oh my God, these guys are gone wild. So that it was because apparently the Irish women were just they loved this new blood. So there was plenty of them. So they just melted together extremely well, and pretty soon, from the English point of view, these guys had degenerated to being mere Irish, But there was no doubt in the world they were absolutely seduced by the Irish lifestyle and the Irish culture, and they were very learned people. They were not wild, crazy, horse riding savages. They were very, because they were artisans. They were top of their society, and they wanted to build, they wanted to do all kinds of things. So, and they obviously found kindred spirits among the Irish. Kevin?
How they work along the system of the law that was there already?
That's the most interesting thing of it all, actually. Because the Brehon law was very, very ancient and very entrenched in the Irish life, the Irish way of life. And the Normans actually, surprisingly enough, adopted it. And it wasn't until much, much later that they started to enforce their law primarily